Dr. Marc Allan Feldman and Mr. Darryl W. Perry. I'm Rena Shah-Barara, and this is the Presidential Debate Series. Hello and welcome to the Presidential Debate Series. I'm your host, Rena Shah-Barara. Today, we have two candidates from the Libertarian Party. Dr. Marc Allan Feldman graduated from Northwestern University in 1980 with a degree in philosophy before moving on to complete medical training at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. He earned his master's degree in health finance and management from the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and practiced anesthesiology there for 11 years. He is a lifetime member of the Delta Omega Public Health Honor Society. And also joining us is Mr. Darryl W. Perry. He hosts the daily newscast, FPP Radio News, the podcast, Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, and the weekly news podcast, FPP Freedom Minute, and is a regular co-host on Free Talk Live. Darryl is a co-founder and co-chair of the New Hampshire Liberty Party and is the owner and managing editor of Free Press Publications. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure.
So Darryl, let's start with you. Do you believe the U.S. Constitution is compatible with libertarian principles?
You know, I would have to agree with Lysander Spooner, who said that the U.S. Constitution has either authorized such tyranny as we have or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it's unfit to exist. And if you actually look at what libertarian principles are, that everybody has the same equal rights as everyone else, that no one has a right to take unjustly from someone else or to cause unjust harm, then no, the U.S. Constitution does not in any way fit in with libertarian principles, because the U.S. Constitution authorizes taxation, which is nothing more than theft. Arguably, it's extortion, which is still a form of theft.
Okay. A quick follow-up to that, though. Do you feel the document should be scrapped altogether, it seems?
I think the federal government should be completely abolished.
Ah, okay. Dr. Feldman, your views.
Oh, I disagree very much. My definition of libertarianism is the movement to empower all individuals to control themselves, their property, and their environment without infringing on the rights of others. The Constitution is a libertarian document. Our founding fathers brought the Constitution into being because they were in revolution against concentrated power of a king. That's why it's worked so well for us when it's been observed. The problem is not our Constitution. Our problem is people ignoring the Constitution or trying to twist it into something that it is not.
So when you say the people ignoring the Constitution, you mean the 435 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, the 100 members of the U.S. Senate, every member of the executive branch, plus the judicial?
Yes, including state governments, local governments, and the part of the population that is either not voting at all or voting for political parties that are make their business of infringing on our rights.
So you feel the Constitution is compatible with libertarian principles because you feel it reflects libertarian principles. Am I correct on that bit?
That's right.
Okay, and you feel it is something that is totally, completely incompatible. Am I correct on that
It's
bit?
contrary to the ideas of liberty.
Ah, okay. Let's move on to another question. Let's start with you, Dr. Feldman, on this one. Do you believe that acts of discrimination by private individuals in hiring or providing services is acceptable?
Well, I always have a problem when people say acceptable. I mean, I'm not the king.
Sure.
People don't ask my permission. Okay. People have the power to do what they choose to do. Now, the question is it good? Is it right? Is it something that should offend people? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The other question is it something that should be illegal? Well, that's an entirely different question, because just because something is wrong, you don't want to make a law that's going to make the situation worse.
Okay.
So, no, it's not acceptable or desirable. And in fact, I think that there are situations where discrimination can cause so much harm that certainly, as we've seen in the past, it was necessary to bring in the power of government to keep people's rights from being infringed on. But in general, we don't want the government involved, and we don't need new legislation. We need people to be engaged with their decisions in the marketplace to be fair to everyone.
Okay, and Mr. Perry, your answer to that?
I have to agree with Dr. Feldman to some extent, but at the same time, you did mention discrimination that happened in the past, and I'm guessing you're talking about the Jim Crow era South, where that discrimination was actually mandated by law. It wasn't just bigoted store owners, it was bigoted politicians that said you are prohibited from serving people of color at the same place that you serve white people. So, do I think that those laws mandating discrimination should have been repealed? Absolutely. Do I think that there should be a law saying that you cannot discriminate? Absolutely not. I would love it if businesses posted, here's all the different people that we don't like and we don't want to serve, because then I would know, okay, I'm not going to go shop at Bigot Cakes. I'm not going to go get a sub sandwich from Bigot Subs. Here's a list of businesses that I will not do business with because they're discriminating against people for race, religion, sexual orientation.
Mr. Perry, do you oppose abortion for moral reasons, even though you think it should be illegal? Do you believe abortion is murder? And if so, shouldn't it be illegal? And if it's not a murder, why do you oppose it?
I personally would never fund an abortion. I don't think that anyone should be forced to fund an abortion if they don't want to fund an abortion. Now, there's the argument of whether or not the mother has a right to expel an unwanted child as a trespasser. And
so terminate an unwanted pregnancy, so to speak.
Not necessarily terminate the pregnancy, but remove the child from the uterus. And you can do that without hacking the child into little bitty pieces to remove the child. So you could induce labor. And there are people that want to adopt children that have been on waiting lists for years that would gladly take the child. So the laws that we have right now sort of prevent what's referred to as prenatal adoption, to where somebody that wants to adopt a child finds somebody that's pregnant that doesn't want their child and make arrangements while the child is still in utero to say, we will pay for your medical expenses to have the child, and then you sign the child over to us. But right now, the way procedures are set up, if a mother, say in the third trimester or late second, decides she doesn't want the child, they don't just induce pregnancy and deliver the child. They will induce pregnancy and then, chop the child up. And that is murder. That is absolutely.
Are these private physicians on their own? Are you talking about entities such as Planned Parenthood, which have been in the news for many months now? Who are you referring to with they?
The abortion providers,
okay.
And most of them, wind up getting some form of government funds, whether it be through Medicare directly or some other subsidy, whether Planned Parenthood, etc. But you can expel a child without killing the child directly.
And you mentioned the laws about prenatal adoption. You feel that there should be laws on the books, federal laws, and perhaps even state laws that should be stronger in support of adoption in the case where a mother may want to seek the option of abortion.
Well, you don't necessarily need to pass a law making adoption stronger. You need to pass a law repealing prohibitions that currently exist.
Now, my feelings underlying are probably similar to Darryl's or anybody else. There's no one, I know very few, if anyone, who's really pro-abortion. We're all anti-abortion. I'm probably the only candidate who's actually seen abortions and how terrible and brutal they are. I've also seen the results of illegal abortions and women who come in terrible throes of sepsis and other problems from illegal abortions. And I always find it cynical where some politicians seem to be very concerned, but only about legal abortions. They're not concerned about the dangerous, painful, illegal ones. So I am anti-abortion. However, I'm, again, get the government out of it. Our government should have no role in promoting, financing, or prohibiting abortion.
Dr. Feldman, there's been a lot of discussion within the Libertarian Party about the non-aggression principle. What does this principle mean to you, and do you support it?
Absolutely. I support the non-aggression principle, which to me means that one should not initiate force against the will of another person. And that this idea is, it's a corollary to the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I wouldn't want anyone to force me to do something I didn't want to do. I shouldn't want to force others. Now, this isn't pacifism necessarily. Certainly, one could respond vigorously in self-defense. But the idea of the non-aggression principle is not to do force against others. The problem I have with it is I feel that it's an important ethical and moral imperative, but it doesn't work as well as a complete political idea because it only tells you what not to do. It doesn't tell you what you need to do. So I pair the non-aggression principle, which is a negative, to the positive empowerment principle, which is that libertarians feel there's a duty to maximize the power of all individuals to control themselves, their property, and their environment as long as they're not infringing on the rights of others. So not only do we say don't do aggression, but we also positively should increase the power of every person to control themselves and their property and environment.
And Mr. Perry, your response to that? Certainly, we've heard from Dr. Feldman what he thinks the principle is and would he support it. What about you?
I can't really disagree with Dr. Feldman's answer, but I would say that I define the non-aggression principle slightly differently in that no one has a right to cause unjust harm to another person. So that would allow for, say, mutual combat. That some people would argue, would or would not exist in a free society, but then you look at things that currently exist that, people agree to get into cages with one another and have fights. So, professional MMA. People are agreeing to that. Somebody might wind up getting hurt, but the participants are consenting to, the combat. So it's completely consensual. And also with unjust harm, let me give an example. Let's say that the three of us are walking down the street and I see something falling out of the sky and I shove you out of the way to prevent the thing from landing on your head. Have I aggressed against you by touching you, without your consent? Probably, but I've prevented a greater harm. So, the harm that I caused to you, if any, would definitely be justified in that I was preventing a greater harm from happening. So, there are some people that they'll look at the non-aggression principle as this complete black and white. You can never touch somebody without their consent, be it, push them out of the way of a car or anything else. But the just and unjust is a very key term within the non-aggression principle as I see it.
Interesting. You say there's a little bit of gray area there. Dr. Feldman, what do you think of that gray area he's alluding to?
Well, I think that's getting to a level that only some libertarian philosophers are really getting interested in. The point is that in practical purposes, it's wrong for government to apply force in a preemptive way or to establish control over an area. That each individual needs to be able to control themselves, and no one should be trying to control others.
I'd like to lob a fun question at you both here, and Mr. Perry, we'll go back to you here. Should you be able to win the White House, and you've got day one coming, what's your first priority when you walk into that Oval Office?
First priority is to release as many nonviolent prisoners from jail as possible, and then start working with Congress to bring the troops home and cut taxes.
Dr. Feldman, what would be your first priority? Were you able to secure the Oval Office for yourself?
Well, certainly there will be a lot of groundwork before day one, after the election, so that I would be able on day one to present a balanced budget to Congress. Congress could then consider it. They could pass it, and I would sign it. They could pass a different balanced budget, and I would sign it. Or they can do as they're doing now and continue to pass continuing resolutions and trying to find ways to raise more and more money and spend more and more money. Meanwhile, as president, I would put out executive orders to put spending caps on every federal agency to limit spending to available revenue. This is not drastic. At the current time, it's between 13 and 14% over budget. So 13 or 14% across the board cuts, and we would have a balanced budget. What the balanced budget does is it makes it so that not a single dollar will be added to our $19 trillion debt. The debt is nothing more than a promise of future taxation. future control of government, again, being able to give benefits and deductions and loopholes to various people to maximize campaign contributions. We need to cap it. We need to stop it, and we need to have a feedback mechanism so that people know if you spend more money on one thing, there'll have to be less to spend on something else.
Mr. Perry, you write on your website that you oppose all laws at any level of government regarding guns or any other tool that can be used for self-defense. Does this include the federal ban on fully automatic weapons? Why or why not?
Yes, as long as the person is intending to use it as self-defense, and you can't really judge intent beforehand. The only things that I would say that people do not have a legitimate right to own would be nuclear weapons, because there's no way to use a nuclear weapon in a purely self-defense manner, because it destroys such a large area. So you're going to wind up killing or maiming someone that is not a threat to you. So, there's no legitimate right to own something that would wind up causing harm by its very nature of use to someone that is not a threat to you. But things that are being used for self-defense reasons, then no, there should not be any prohibitions at all on those.
Okay. Dr. Feldman, what have you got to say to that, given that Mr. Perry's written on his website, and we're talking about a federal ban on fully automatic weapons here? What are your thoughts?
Well, start with our protection of gun rights that are in the Constitution. Now, most laws are really, the police powers are given to the states. So the reason why the right to bear arms is an amendment to our Constitution is because it's not about target practice, hunting, or even self-defense. It's about recognizing the fact that the right of the individual is superior to the power of the state. Okay. So this is to protect our rights from infringement from the government. I've said that we need much more strict and rigorous government gun control because government has way too many guns. The Department of Homeland Security has enough ammo, I think they said, for 5 or 6 shots for every man, woman, and child in the United States. I don't know what they're preparing for, but it concerns me. So I think that we should start by taking fully automatic and all other military equipment away from our domestic police forces, perhaps to save for a few regional special weapons teams in case there was organized armies. However, I live in the town of Beechwood, a sleepy community outside Cleveland, Ohio, and Beechwood has a SWAT team, the Beechwood SWAT team with an armored vehicle, and I don't know what they're planning on using it for, but I know that when the police officers have something like that, they'd like to use it. Now, in terms of a ban on fully automatic weapons, well, I guess the question is, what would it do? To a certain extent, when you make any type of weapon illegal, well, then only the criminals are the ones who have access to them. If that's all that it would achieve, I don't see a reason just to add another law to make people feel better about it. It actually makes them less safe.
All right, let's take some questions from our viewers. Our first question comes from Regina Torres, and she asks, who is the smartest liberal writer you have ever read? Mr. Perry.
Who is the smartest what?
Liberal writer you have ever read.
I would have to say the Frenchman Frédéric Bastiat, who wrote the book The Law in 1848.
Okay, and why is that your top choice?
He described himself as a classic liberal.
Okay.
And that's really, if you trace libertarianism back, it really began as classic liberalism. And the book is as poignant today as it was in 1848, where he describes taxes, and you've probably seen the memes floating around on Facebook that say taxation is theft. He, in 1848, described taxation as legal plunder. And he said that looking at legal plunder, we have 3 options. Some plunder some, everyone plunders everyone, or no one plunders anyone. And I prefer a society to where no one plunders from anyone, that there is no such thing as coercive taxation, that there is no such thing as government saying, you have to give us a portion of the fruits of your labor. You have to give us a portion of the value of your property. That is plunder. And, to put it succinctly in modern terms, taxation is theft.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that choice. Dr. Feldman, what's your choice for the smartest, I guess you can say the smartest liberal, if you call one that, smartest liberal writer you've ever read? Well,
when you say liberal to a libertarian, you're going to hear about a 19th or 18th century liberal, someone like Bastiat, or I refer to, in terms of one of the smartest writers, would be what I recall when John F. Kennedy had a meeting of Nobel Prize winners at the White House, and he said that this was the greatest accumulation of intelligence in the White House ever since Thomas Jefferson dined alone. And Thomas Jefferson, the writer of the Declaration of Independence, I find is just absolutely insightful. And a lot of my libertarian comes from his view that no man has the right to infringe on the rights of any other man, and that's the only thing that should be restraining him, and that every man has the duty to contribute to the necessities of the society, and that is all that should be asked of him. This combination of freedom from control and non-aggression on the one hand, with a recognition of duty and mutual voluntary assistance, that I think made him really very special and so successful in the founding of our country. Now, in terms of what Ms. Rodriguez refers to a liberal, one of the smartest ones is Robert Reich. I disagree with everything that he says, and Bernie Sanders would be another one. People tell me I sound like Bernie Sanders because I agree with Bernie Sanders on nearly 100% of the problems. I happen to disagree with him on 100% of the solutions. Okay. Bernie looks to government for solutions, where I think that we should look to the people. I don't want to tell our government, leave us alone. I want to tell the government, chill, we got this.
Interesting. Well, we've got another viewer question that comes from Rodney Bryant. This time we'll start with you. What policy does another country get right that we would be well served to adopt in our country?
I would start with the London Police Department, who year after year refuses to have firearms. That they understand that when a police officer sees a member of the public, they want to get respect for who they are, not fear of the firearm that they're carrying.
Oh, wow. All right. Mr. Perry, your thoughts on, another policy that another country gets right, and, well, you could also agree and give the same policy, but we'd like to hear another one.
I'm actually going to give a completely different policy, but sure. Still in Europe, Switzerland.
Okay.
And not their renowned chocolate making, although that is good, but their foreign policy, to where they do not interfere in the foreign affairs of other countries. It's one of the reasons that Switzerland has not been at war for several hundred years, because they do have the policy of being officially neutral. And
so not an isolationist policy?
That they are not isolationist.
Okay.
Because
all right. We just want to distinguish.
We get watches and chocolate and cheese from Switzerland. Okay. So if you're isolationist, you're North Korea. You're not trading with foreign countries. Okay. If you're just non-interventionist, then you're Switzerland, to where you're still trading with foreign countries. You're just not interfering in their foreign affairs.
So it's now time for Answer This, where each guest asks a question directly to each other. Who would like to go first on that bit?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
The President of the United States is an office that is set up and created by the Constitution. In order to become president, one has to take an oath to protect and defend our Constitution. How are you ever going to get your first day in office if you can't take that oath? And if you can't, are you even running for president?
Mr. Perry, what would you say to that?
Yes, I am running for president, and I'm doing so to spread the ideas of liberty. Now, there's a major difference between the way people run for an office and whether or not they honestly believe that they can win. And I would say that if you're running as anything other than a highly financed Republican or Democrat, and you say that you honestly believe that you could win the presidency, you are probably delusional.
Okay, interesting. Now, Mr. Perry, it's your opportunity now to ask a question of Dr. Feldman. So what have you got?
Dr. Feldman, if you could make one modification to the United States Constitution, any one change, and that change would include abolishing it, if you could make one change, what change would it be and why?
I would do the same answer that Thomas Jefferson gave, which is to take away the federal government's ability to borrow money. And the reason is, Thomas Jefferson understood that whether you have a direct democracy or representative government or even with a monarchy, what keeps the people free is not the form of the government, but the engagement and power of the individuals who are being represented. And when government can just borrow money instead of engaging with the citizenry doesn't see what the government is doing. And that's why we see in other countries like Saudi Arabia, which doesn't have taxation, it's not a free country. So by taking away the government's ability to borrow, this is a way to establish and take power away from the government and bring it back to the individual.
Here we are, and we're in the segment called We Agree, where each guest names something the other said that he agrees with. So who'd like to start with that bit? Dr. Feldman, we're back to you.
Well, I think that for many things, Darryl and I agree on the direction we should be moving. I think we agree on empowerment of the individual and the reduction in government. And above all else, what I agree with Mr. Perry on is the fact that he has principles. And you don't have to figure out what he really believes. All you have to do is listen to him.
Sure, you'd alluded to that before about other mainstream candidates. Mr. Perry, what have you got to say on this We Agree portion?
I would say that I agree with Dr. Feldman that we need to prevent the federal government from borrowing money, because that's how we've gotten, quite frankly, into the mess that we're in. And I recall when I was in high school 20 plus years ago, and the national debt hit what I thought at the time was this astronomical number of $4 trillion, thinking, wow, we'll never repay that. How do we wind up getting rid of this debt? And then I said, well, when businesses go this much in debt, they dissolve and reorganize and file bankruptcy. Maybe the U.S. federal government should do that as well. So I do agree that borrowing money is a huge problem. We just disagree on how you wind up solving that problem.
Okay. That's all we have time for today, and we'd like to thank Dr. Marc Allan Feldman and Mr. Darryl W. Perry of the Libertarian Party for joining us on the show. And thank you for watching the Presidential Debate Series. I'm Rena Shaw-Barara. We'll see you next time.